Ladies and gentlemen, episode 4 Resolute TV. Freedom Chef here. Thanks for tuning in again. We're getting really excited. Our first episode's hit 600 views. That's got to mean something to somebody. To me, it's just a nice little milestone. We set ourselves some modest targets when we started this project. So to the guys regularly tuning in, thanks. To the new guys coming on board, appreciate it. This week we kick off with Stephan Wells, and we're tackling some tough issues, all based on the government lockdowns and his perspective on that. So jump in on Stephan Wells. He's crackerjack. Thanks, guys. Rightio, ladies and gentlemen, here's Stephan Wells, our author, very good author from what I understand. I've been reading a few of your reviews online for the Confessions of a Climate Change Denier. It all seems very positive, mate. Even the ones who aren't sure what to make of your thoughts, eh?
Thank you. I'll look at it now, seeing as you're giving me a plug. There it is. So
there it is. There it is. Look at that.
Available from me directly if you live in Australia, and available from Amazon as a paperback or as a download on Kindle if you live elsewhere. I give it to people in Australia from home because Amazon charges a lot of money to ship it everywhere. So
there you go. I wasn't quite sure how Amazon worked. So the ones from home all signed, autographed, fresh hot off the press, is it?
People who get them directly from me get preferential treatment, and they get collector's editions. Yes.
Very good. Well done, mate. Well done.
Billions of dollars in the future. Billions.
That sounds good to me. Or maybe millions of bitcoins in the future. Is that a better idea, or
possibly
millions of tons of gold?
If Bitcoin eventually becomes the thing that replaces the current what do we call them? Not fiat money, just monopoly money. I think is a better word for it these days.
Monopoly money. I've described it as monopoly money a couple of times in this week. So how have you been, mate? What's been happening in the world of Stephan Wells? I know you keep a very close eye on all the COVID stuff that's been happening. What's your take? The governments are now talking about releasing us a little bit. How long do you see it happening for? Or do you think there's a motivation for it? Give us from the minds of Stephan.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we follow the Imperial College of London still, then obviously a reprieve was always going to happen. They flattened the curve. They've stomped on it. They've put it down so much that there's less than a little speed hump in the way now. They've got 1 or 2 cases per day. We've got no more deaths. So yeah, the pressure's going to mount for them to ease it a bit. But the agenda is to bring it back in again. Once we all start being normal human beings, we're going to spread the virus around again. As soon as they open up international travel, the virus will come in again. So yeah, sadly it's planned to be temporary. The lockdown reprieves are planned to be not quite complete. The releases a little bit to give a taste of freedom, but never give us full freedom again. So yeah, we've got a lot of work to do in terms of protesting and in terms of keeping the pressure on the governments, because once they've got some powers, they don't like to relinquish them.
No, they don't. There's nothing more permanent than a temporary government program or a temporary government promise, mate. So have you got any thoughts on what's been going on in America? A lot of the states over there have sort of said, listen, you can bash your lockdown up your bum. We're quite happy to go out and run the risk, and that's our choice to make. And then, of course, the other comparative country would be Sweden. They've taken a fairly different approach, and the numbers from what I read earlier are not that different to countries of similar population with similar levels of infection. Am I in the ballpark?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, especially in terms of Europe generally, Sweden sits kind of in the middle. Lots of countries that have got it worse than Sweden, and pretty much everywhere the story is the same. It's affecting the same group of people. It's affecting people who are already very sick. It's affecting people who are very, very old, and the rest of us, we don't really appear to be at much risk. Yeah, we might get sick. We might even get very sick, but the chances of us actually dying appear to be next to zero. So the whole case for the lockdown really doesn't stack up. What's bugging me more, or concerning me more, in the US story at the moment is the stories coming out of them, of the farmers being forced to kill their livestock. So
yes, I saw something about pig farmers with that. That's
pigs, cattle, chicken, the works, even even vegetables, grains. It's all going to waste because what's happened is in the middle of it all, you've got the farmers on one side, you've got the consumers at the end of the supermarket on the other, and in the middle you've got government bureaucracy and government lockdowns, which are stopping people from going to work in the food processing industry. So the slaughterhouses, the meat packing, all of this kind of stuff. So what's happened is that the farmers haven't got anybody to sell it to, because the people who they normally sell it to haven't got workers to actually process the meat and process the vegetables and process the works. So this is all happening at the prime time for slaughtering the animals, the prime time for harvesting and all the rest of it. For certain crops, and so they're basically having to destroy it all. Not only this year's meat, but also aborting the babies of the sows, and the killing off the calves and that kind of stuff. So next year and future generations, it's really affecting the food supply. And then on the other side of things, what's also then concerning is the supermarkets. People haven't stopped wanting to buy the meat, and so there's now, because of the same bottleneck, they're not being able to supply the meat again because they haven't got the staff to do so, because they're all locked away. And so the prices of food is going up on one side, and the farmers can't sell it on the other side. And so there's some serious problems here for a country of 330 million that supplies the world with food, a lot of the food. When you start hearing about them slaughtering millions and millions of animals, that's a serious problem down the track, if it's not a serious problem already. So that is very, very concerning at the moment.
Now, does that fit in with the agenda? Was it London University? Is that the name of the document? Sorry, does that sort of slide in there somewhere? Does it fit in? You've obviously studied it fairly extensively. Does that fit in as part of the process?
It might fit in more with the globalist agenda, but at the moment it just appears to be an unintended consequence of government stupidity. To be honest with you, whether there is somebody behind all of that who wants to induce government stupidity, somebody higher up in the Illuminati one eye.
I must say, governments don't usually need a lot of help with their stupidity or enhancing it. So whether there's somebody puppeteering them or not, I'm pretty sure they'd have the same problems anyway.
I think in terms of puppeteering, oops, sorry, I was getting feedback again. In terms of puppeteering, everybody seems to think it's like some Dr. Evil type character who's dictating to the world, and if you don't comply, you'll find yourself in a seat that tips backwards and ends up in a lava pit. But the influence, we're talking about books earlier. I'm currently writing a book on COVID, so I'm looking into how everything sort of ties together. And really, the way these sort of things work is not so much directly, but rather we have a government system and a bureaucratic system which is open to influence just simply because of the way the bureaucratic system is set up. So if you know that governments are incompetent, and if you know that governments work a certain way, then you can influence them by doing certain things. You can put funding into certain areas of research. You can put funding into, put people on boards of directors in various places. You can set up foundations. You can do all kinds of things. And what it does is not necessarily control puppets, as in, you must, gun to your head, you must do this. Rather, it's a case of everybody's sort of following the natural incentives that they've got. And somebody behind the scenes is going, well, that person's got that incentive. So if I do this, then there'll be more people to have the incentive to do that. And so when we're looking at people who run the world, you know, the Bilderberg Group and all of these others, it's a much more subtle process and a much less coercive process. It's just simply a matter of installing the right systems in place, and then people do what they naturally do.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. People naturally serve their own best interests, no matter what that is, or their own what they feel is their own best interests. I've been accused, and many people have, of cutting their nose off to spite their face, and that's still internally for them is cutting their, is serving their own interest in what they think is right or think is best. People like yourself and myself, we tend to put ourselves out there with a not necessarily popular opinion, and maybe with different incentives we may change our view, but I think we're the last sort of bastion of humans that are questioning a lot of this stuff. Guys, not just you and I, but the people like us. The rest are sort of quite happy to, oh, there's a carrot, I'm going to follow the carrot. And
yeah, oh God, bureaucrats are probably the ones to really sort of look at in terms of that sort of thing, because bureaucrats have basically got a job to do, and they've got a set of rules to follow. And it's not that they're nasty or evil people, it's that they're told to go and do research and follow things up in a certain way, and that they're limited by that. So when they're advising governments on anything, so for example, my wife was as a mermaid and wanted to go swim in a swimming pool as a mermaid, and they wouldn't let her, not because they're evil, not because they're determined to stamp on freedoms, but simply because the system was set up in such a way is that the onus of responsibility had been placed onto the bureaucrats, and the bureaucrats had liabilities under the council. And so they were basically saying, well, these are our liabilities, these are what we are tasked to do. Therefore, until you can show us some official research to tell us that mermaid tails are safe, we have to go with the only piece of research that we've got, which is over here.
Yeah.
And so that's the way they work. And so when it comes to things like, more important issues like coronavirus, if, say, you're part of the Gates Foundation and you've stuck, $20 billion over the last 10 years into research of how to deal with a pandemic, well, obviously you've put your money into research to look at things that you want to look at. So Bill Gates looks at the things that he wants to look at, and he pays tons and tons of money to do so. And that then builds up a body of research, which just happens to fulfill the views of Bill Gates. Then when it comes to the bureaucracy and they go, oh, well, there's a pandemic coming up, well, they are then tasked and obligated to look at the research. Well, what's the most recent research? Well, all of the most recent research has been funded by Bill Gates because he's the only one who's got skin in the game at the moment. And that's nothing, and that might mean Bill Gates is a completely benevolent character, and it might mean the bureaucrats are a completely benevolent character. The problem is that the only thing that the bureaucrats have to draw from are these things saying lock everybody down.
Yeah.
And if that's all they've got to draw from, then that's what the advice goes is to government. And if that's the advice that goes to government, and you're a politician and you want to get elected in a couple of years' time, it's very, very hard to turn around and say, well, I'll stuff this advice is all wrong, this advice is rubbish. Because then the press will come along to the politician and say, well, why are you ignoring the experts?
Yeah. Yep. And look, I've met quite a lot of political figures, as I'm sure you have as well, and most of them are really quite nice people. I mean, you don't meet them and go, geez, that person, what an absolute, there's probably a handful. I mean, we've got to be realistic. There's some there that we're just never going to like.
I hate everybody.
Equal opportunist, mate. Yeah, me too, to a degree. That's the chef thing. But I mean, in and of themselves, I think you're right. They don't actively go out of their way to perform evil deeds or anything, but they are set up in a position where the decisions they're making are manipulated. I'm certain, and I'm certain we all get manipulated in different ways. Let's be realistic. That's what the TV's for, the radio, the podcast. That's what Parliament's for. It's all a manipulation. I've watched Koshy this week give the health minister a bit of a tongue lashing on how they should deal with Barnaby Joyce for his wrong think this week. How dare you, Barnaby, not go and get this tracking out? And then on the other channel, I can't remember whichever one it is, Carl Stefanovic and Pauline Hanson going at it with a very similar train of thought. Pauline saying, I don't trust the government, therefore I'm not downloading it. And Carl saying, well, you're a disgrace. How dare you not do what's best for everybody? And well, you know, I've got a little bit more faith in at least the questioning of it than I have just agreeing to download an app. I know I won't be downloading it anytime soon. I don't know about yourself.
No, I wouldn't touch it with a barge pole. If they tried to force it on me, then you know it's time to go and find a rusty old gun. I think, you know, somewhere. I don't know where I'll get one these days, but it's when you start getting to that kind of level where, you know, you have to do things or else. Yeah, you really. This is what is probably going to start happening in the US if they don't ease up. Because in the US, unlike in Australia, they do have a history of civil war, and there's a lot of people talking about that kind of stuff right now, and it's getting kind of scary. So,
they do have a lot of guns they don't have a shortage of guns. Unlike us, we gave all of ours away in '96. It was '96, wasn't it? Thereabouts that we handed them all over.
Yeah, before I got here, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I could have bought one.
Stash it away, mate. Stash it away. Look, again, Stephen, as always, it's a delight to talk to you each week. Your viewpoint is, I actually really enjoy your viewpoints. I get a bit tired, so hopefully we're getting some positive feedback for your thought processes, and hopefully your new book, we can tell people more about it over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I hope so too. Kind of maybe a couple of weeks left to finish it off, and hopefully by June we'll be ready.
Beautiful. Sounds good. All right, tap that.
Hey guys, I am Beltran, Resolute TV contributor, and we have a great person, a new person to the lineup. It is John Gray. He is part of the HR Nicholls Society. It's all about industrial relations and helping us out when we need it. And in this discussion, we talk about industrial relations, HR Nicholls Society, COVID-19. It's all there. Check it out.
Again. Righto, ladies and gentlemen, Resolute TV, this is going to be episode 4. We've got John Gray, who's the executive director of a group called the HR Nicholls Society. It's a human relations style group. He's going to tell us all about it, and then we're going to discuss some of the things that they're up to and what they've been doing and what they stand for and why they stand for it and how that's of benefit to you. So, John, tell us, what's the HR Nicholls Society? What's it all about, mate?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, Dean. I appreciate it. It's a great opportunity to let people know what we're all about. And essentially, HR Nicholls Society is it's Australia's only dedicated industrial relations think tank. So we focus purely on industrial relations, labour market reforms, essentially looking at advocating for voluntary relationships between employees and employers. And so we've been doing that since 1986. There were four blokes that started the society, including well-known treasurer Peter Costello under the Howard government. And essentially our vision is a fair go for every Australian, where freedom, prosperity and opportunity can flourish free from coercion. So we're no different to any of the other sort of free market, classical liberal think tanks. We fully believe that the government's intervention into the economy and into industrial relations policy leaves people worse off than they would be if we had free market policies. So essentially just advocating for those free market policies.
Okay, so the first thing I could see anybody questioning you on there is, what about evil employers who are slave driving their employees? That's going to be the first thing anybody's going to ask me when I talk about what you've just said, which I do all the time, to be fair. How do you answer it? How do you respond to that? And how do you sort of tackle the whole evil employer versus evil government argument? I mean, I sort of see both as being or capable of being negative, and both are capable of being positive.
Yeah, that's right. It's one of the things that people raise a lot. And the problem with that sort of argument and asking that question is it assumes that there is a power imbalance between employers and employees, which just isn't the case. So employers need workers. Now, I'm not talking about labor theory of value or anything like that. It's not Marxism, but without employees, employers do not have the capacity or the capability to create the product that they need to create, or whatever industry they're in. People need workers, right? That we know. Now, there's this idea that there is this imbalance, but if you look at it from the perspective of employers need employees, then you realize that the employee actually has a fair amount of they have a fair amount of influence in the relationship. And I guess that's where you're talking about unions, and that's why unions crop up. And I don't have an issue with unions and employees banding together and creating these sort of associations. I believe in freedom of association 100%. Where that becomes an issue is where the unions stop working for the workers and start working for their mates. And that's what we've seen with the CFMMEU and the ACTU and the like. They don't actually care about their workers as much as they say they do. So when you come at it from the premise that there is a power imbalance, then the idea of exploitation and evil workers or evil employers seems to be a huge issue, right? And we do see it sometimes, and in those cases, there are laws that exist to cater for if someone's breaking the law, if someone is exploiting someone, then we do have laws in place to cater for that anyway. But the majority of employers in Australia, at least, I'm not talking about third world countries, the majority of employers in Australia are actually just regular people. They're regular folk. So if you look at the most recent statistics from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, 63% of Australian businesses are not employing. And so you've got 37% there that employ people. Now, of that 37%, something I think, I read these statistics the other day, up to 70% of those employ between 1 and 4 people. So you're not looking at big business. You're not looking at medium to large business in Australia. You are simply looking at mum and pop shops, everyday Australians that are creating these businesses, and they need employees. Big business in Australia accounts for 0.2% of all businesses. So I'm not saying you don't have exploitation. I'm not saying there isn't sometimes a power imbalance, but we need to look at it from the numbers, and the numbers they really don't suggest that there is this imbalance, and they don't suggest that these regular, ordinary Australian business owners will exploit workers.
No, which I would imagine is fairly standard. It's like anything, though. There's always somebody who will do the wrong thing, and unfortunately, what society currently does is they punish from the lowest common denominator, as opposed to going 85% of these people are doing the right thing, 15% aren't doing the wrong thing. Well, let's just punish everybody and make it harder for everybody to operate.
That's right. And so it's one of the other things that you need to look at when you talk about this power imbalance or exploitation is the ease for employees and employers to move on. So right now we have this I guess we'll call it a prohibition on low paid work. Now that necessarily limits the number of jobs that are available. So as I said, 63% of Australian businesses don't employ anyone. They are sole trading businesses with no employees, or their family employees. Now, if we are removing the restriction on low paid work, we're suddenly going to see a lot more jobs opening up, which gives the power back to the employee. What that does is it just flips the supply and demand side of things. At the moment, we have a huge amount of demand for jobs and not a lot of supply. If we flip that and create a huge amount of a huge amount of demand, then necessarily wages will go up. Necessarily people will treat their employees better because they don't want to lose them. And arguably the better performers as employees are rewarded disproportionately as opposed to like the blanket, every kid gets a trophy format, which is what our current work relations system sort of employs, is every kid deserves a trophy. You're all the same, you're all a number. Whereas what that means is you've got some people who are getting paid far in excess, in my opinion, than what their capabilities or production or contribution to any given business is worth. And then you've got people who are overperforming
and probably not getting that extra dough because it's being siphoned off towards less productive, less useful. So you can't actually really reward those who are out trying to achieve and do good work. Would that be right within your frame of thinking, or am I sort of being a bit of an elitist?
No, I think a little bit that's right. What I'm more talking about is creating more jobs, and the more jobs there are, then the more choice an employee has, and employers then need to increase the work conditions. They need to increase the pay. If you want to get the best, as you're saying, in a pure meritocracy, if you want the best, then you need to pay for the best, and you need to treat them like they are the best. Now, at the moment, what we have is a situation where, I know it's a different situation with coronavirus, and we're seeing unemployment jump maybe up to about 14%. We don't know. We're looking at 10% at the moment, and that's early numbers from the start of April. What we're seeing now is a lack of jobs, and it really is as simple as supply and demand. When there is more supply than there is demand, then prices are going to go down. And when there is less supply than there is demand, prices will go up. And it's no different with industrial relations and labour market. It's absolutely no different.
The oil price at the moment is a fairly good indicator of that. Nobody's leaving the house, nobody's driving anywhere, so the price of oil has tanked. That's
spot on. And so people tend to, when you take a good and you explain it to them like that, like you're saying with the oil, people understand that. They understand what you're talking about. The second that you take the good as a product and you replace it with a human, immediately people, they lose their minds, and they can't withdraw themselves from the emotion of the situation and look at it as, well, actually, your labor is a good. You are providing a good to someone to buy. That's all it is. That's it.
You're trading your time for cash.
That's it.
Well, hang on, we're not allowed to use cash anymore. A fiat currency that lands in your bank account via a computer screen.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You're talking about Bitcoin, obviously.
Oh, I'm learning about Bitcoin. It's one of our little programs at the moment. Just as you probably noticed with this program, we're touching on a few different things, and I figure as I learn it, other people will learn it, and it becomes a really interesting way to do things. So, based on what you've just said, what's your opinion? Obviously, look, the coronavirus is a completely different thing. People are talking bailouts. I've always been pretty anti-bailout. The government really should have nothing to do with any of these things. But then I've also looked at a lot of scenarios. I've seen it with farmers, and I've seen where the only reason these people are going broke is government interference. So is it fair to say that the government should be coming up with something for Virgin? If they were, under what conditions would you accept that? How would you look at something like that from your position?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question, and it's something that I'm completely torn on, because I don't believe in bailouts for companies. If we talk specifically about Virgin, look at Richard Branson has sold off one of his islands in the Bahamas or something like that in the Bahamas to keep it afloat. That's fantastic. It's his company. If he has the assets to sell and to be able to keep it afloat, then he should. But when it gets tricky is, and this is why I'm torn on it, is exactly what you say, that it is a result of the government. Now, do I think that the reaction has been oversold, heavy-handed? Yes, I do. But I still think that there were some necessary restrictions on things, and I think movement is one of those things. I don't believe that closing businesses here in West Australia at least was the best idea, and we can talk about why in a second. But because the government has effectively destroyed the business, I don't think that they should be able to avoid some of the repercussions and some of the blame, and so but where it gets tricky is that when we talk about bailouts, we're not talking about government money. The government doesn't have money. They have money that we give them to use. So I personally, you and I, Dean, we didn't shut down borders.
I would question the term give. We don't. I question the term "give them money." We don't give them money; it's forcibly taken.
Well, that's right. That's right. You know, we are talking about the correct use of language, and that's important. So they take our money, and they are now proposing to. Well, you know, they may or may not be proposing. Certain states are looking at it. Victoria and Queensland, I think, were looking at it last I checked. But the reason why I'm so torn is, yes, the government did force this industry to close. Yes, they did force Virgin to go into administration, however which way you look at it. But the government themselves don't have any money to bail out Virgin for their mistakes. Let's look at it as, you know, Scott Morrison's worth, I don't know how much he's worth, maybe 10, 15 million, who knows. He might be worth less than that. I know Turnbull was worth in 50 to 60 million. If it is the decision of the people in the government to do so, then they need to take some of the responsibility. But that responsibility, if you're going to bail out, well, then you're not. It's our money. You see where I'm torn on this, and this is why I struggle to formulate my opinion on it, because you know, I feel
the same way.
It's a hard one. It's our money. There has to be other ways to go about it. But when you look at it, by the same token, Virgin is a business like any other, and the assets are there. The planes are still there. There is going to be demand. The demand will pick up once this is all over. I am certain that somebody else will pick up those assets. A new company will start up and thrive. Who knows what's going to happen? But I think a bailout is the last thing that we should be doing, purely because it's our money, it's taxpayer money, and we didn't make the decision to shut down the economy.
Hey guys, this week's our last episode with Vic Yadelchka, the Liberland president. We at Resolute TV, we have our own president on the show because we're pretty cool. Now, Vic Yadelchka is running a country between Serbia and Croatia. He's claimed a piece of dirt, made it his own, and he's got 600,000 citizens. That's epic. Here's Mr. Yadelchka, the president. Now, one of the questions that I was asked when I spoke to a few people about what you're trying to achieve is how would the education system work for your citizens? I'm for privatising and voluntary type systems. How is the education system going to be structured in Liberland? How are you going to tackle it?
Our constitution forbids us from organizing education whatsoever. But I'm happy to be personally engaged in the setup of Liberland University, which will be mostly online universities with summer exams in Liberland. And that is taking off as we speak, literally. I'm going to call the guy right after we finish the call because we've got some unfinished paperwork to do. But I'm really happy that the project has taken off with a bunch of professors, both from Czech Republic and the United States. And so that way we will also have full accreditation for MBA programs for both EU and United States.
Yeah, right. That's pretty exciting as well. So, hey, are you getting much traction with other countries, other established nations, supporting you? As I presume the Australian Prime Minister hasn't sent you a congratulations and given you any sort of support in that way?
No, but of course we let the Australian government know at the very beginning of Liberland, and I think we already sent them congratulation letter for the election, I guess, but because we're doing it now on the regular basis with our governments. Yes, we have got a couple regular countries, UN member states, that recognize us by now. It is quite exciting, but we don't want to reveal those diplomatic relations until they are strengthened and we are able actually to build up on them. So, you know, like our mission, I would say, in the terms of diplomatic progress, is one of the most successful if you consider the age of our country, and we're doing quite well. And I'm really happy that we've got some heavyweights in diplomatic world like Tariq Abbasi, who has been able to really push the recognition of Liberland forward through his channels, because he's also representative of British Queen.
Yeah, yes. What a great coup to have somebody like that working with you and supporting your concept. So your background before you got into politics and running your own country, what was your profession, life experience? Who are you, Mr. President, before you were Mr. President?
I set up one of the biggest decentralized internet networks. I think actually in the world right now we have grown to some 400,000 users in Czech Republic. So I have a little bit of experience in organizing large organizations, and right after I studied the economy, and I also studied the political science as a side kind of my part-time interest. So I finished that, and right after I was working as a financial analyst for one of the biggest brokerage companies in Czech Republic, and right after I started Liberland. So I went from financial world into from political world a little bit. We also started our political libertarian party in the process, but basically straight from the college, after a couple years of work experience in the financial markets, I went on and started Liberland.
That's fantastic. So you've had some world experience. We've seen some people who have tried things like this and they've just tried to do it out of their backyard, whereas you've actually gone ahead and found a great piece of land, a property that is certainly a viable piece of land to claim. I mean, I know other people have tried to claim things like the moon, Antarctica, other areas like that, which is, it's sort of interesting and fun to see them do that. But you've actually found somewhere that's really, really viable and practical for what you're trying to do, and it makes it more achievable, a more real country, I suppose, in geographical terms. Is how did you come across it?
Give you some perspective, maybe, you know, we're the same size as Gibraltar. We're 10 times bigger than Vatican, 3 times bigger than Monaco, so it's the right size of the country to start with.
So beautiful size, beautiful size. How did you find this piece of land? How did you come across it? You just sort of went hunting for land, or you spotted the land and then decided, I'm going to claim that and make that my country?
Well, that was very easy. Google it, you know, go for no man's land, and you will find the last missing pieces. And there is a nice article on Wikipedia with all the available territories out there.
Yeah, right. So if one of our viewers wanted to join Liberland or contribute to Liberland, how would you recommend they do it? And
it's probably the easiest process is to go online and sign up for e-residency or citizenship, or just contact me directly. It's president@liberland.org. I would be really keen if we got a proper representative office in Australia going.
Okay, well, I'll put my hand up to give you a hand with that. No problem at all.
Awesome.
I've been involved in the Australian Libertarian Party for the last 5 or 6 years, funnily enough, and I've been sort of dabbling and learning. So that was part of the reason I reached out. I thought, fantastic, this is a man who's already achieving things. So I'd like to talk to you and get to know you a little bit more and see how it all works. So as far as other things go within the economy, how are you going to work it? What things are going to? Are you looking for specific people at the moment? Is there a specific skill set you're lacking, and is there, or not yourself, but as in Liberland, is there an area that you're looking to strengthen?
We're literally, we need the people in all segments of the society to build Liberland. But right now we're finishing our constitution. I would really appreciate a couple more constitutional lawyers to be on our advisory board, because it's a process which requires some serious intellectual strength and experience in these things. And I don't want to redo it later. I would like to really, now after 5 years, take the 5 constitutional drafts that we have, combine them in one nice document.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, that sounds pretty exciting. Look, I'm really looking forward to seeing how this all unfolds. And now that obviously we've made contact, hopefully we'll stay in touch a little bit. Now, is there any message you'd like to send? I understand Liberland has its own beer. What other products of interest? What fun things are happening, as opposed to all the politics side of it? What's fun going on?
Well, Liberland is another fun organization which is great to be part of. We're also considering getting an airport in Serbia for the sake of having an international airport later on for Liberland. And right now I'm actually really kind of enjoying the humanitarian part of Liberland. As we speak, we've got 600,000 respirators shipped into the United States. There is 600 masks shipped to Croatia. And I'm planning to go with initial 3,000 respirator shipment to the Serbian hospital. So we need to be able to show some economic strength and ability to help the times of crisis. And it's true that in many Serbian hospitals, still the doctors in the front line don't have the protective gears. So I'm going to take Air Liberland to deliver the products of Liberland Aid Foundation from Czech Republic to Serbia, and I hope I will be able to visit Liberland on the way.
That's excellent. Look, I'm really excited for you. We're almost at time for the availability on the program. But is there anything, any message you'd like to send to our viewers on behalf of Liberland? Anything you'd like to sort of put out there that we haven't covered yet?
I would like to remind you of our motto. It's live and let live. Live and let live.
I think that's a fantastic motto. Okay, so President Yadelka, is that am I getting better?
It's a tough one. Jedlička. Don't try.
It is with an Australian accent for sure. Look, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Don't be surprised if I don't harass you a little bit more on occasion.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for coming on. Resolute TV fans will be ecstatic, and we'll talk again soon, hopefully.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.
Hey guys, we return now to the Dan Taxation in Stephan Behrman 2020 candidate for the presidential election. And here we have him discussing with Dean the libertarian movement in Australia as well as the US and guns. Take a look. Okay.
Right. Now, I don't know if you know anything about our libertarian movement in Australia at all. It's certainly not as big, but I think statistically, we compare quite well. I'm a member of a political party called the Liberal Democrats, and we had a federal senator for 5 or 6 years over here, which was a pretty big deal. He was our first elected senator, and currently in the current climate, he's no longer a sitting member, but he's also participating in this program. We also have two what are called MLCs in Victoria, so. They're down there doing a good job, which Victoria is probably the closest thing to a socialist republic in Australia. And over in Western Australia, we've got a young bloke named Aaron Stonehouse, who's also an MLC. So we've actually got 3 libertarian elected officials in our system. So we're really proud of them, and they're doing a great job. And we've got quite a few that are running for council, like local councils and things like that. So it's a growing movement over here. So we're a bit excited about it. And hopefully we can develop and grow it, and I'll with this program, hopefully give a little bit of air to some libertarian philosophies. So what's your thoughts, Dan, on obviously gun control? Big issue. Lots of people for, against. I've always been a little bit, again, I've been on the fence with gun control and legalizing of marijuana and other drugs sort of thing. I've always been, is it really that big of an issue? Does it really matter? But I've always been the tax, the pro-business, get government out of your bedroom and your life. It's nothing to do with them. Where do you sit on those couple of issues?
Yes. So gun control, I like to say, requires 2 hands. It is a very divided issue here in the U.S. And I know Australia's, you've got a full gun ban at this point, right?
What we had was in, I think it was 96. We had a guy, and look, even the validity of this crime is still questioned in many circles about how legitimate it was. But a guy in one of our little states called Tasmania went on a shooting rampage. The general government story was, this guy's a nutter. He's gone around with an automatic weapon and murdered a heap of people. We need to ban all guns, just lock them up, shut the door. So they had a gun amnesty. Our Conservative Prime Minister at the time, he enacted all the gun bans. People still, farmers can still get guns with the right permits, and there are sporting shooters who in a lot of ways are still very much demonized, and there are a lot of restrictions. As I said, that's not my bugbear issue, but there's unlike you guys where it's, you've got conceal and carry, and you've got an awful lot of things like that. There is a big gun culture in America that Australia just doesn't have. And in around that 96 buyback scheme, we've essentially got a disarmed population. The citizenry there is no gun. No, there's no major gun culture over here at all.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, you get to a point in society where you have relatively low crime, and of course, right now we have the lowest crime that we've had in the entire world. And it's hard for people to see that because, you know, once you see a crime happen, it's, you know, everybody always says, "Oh my God, things are getting so terrible these days." When actually crime has been improving for I think the last 20 or 30 years.
Per capita, yeah.
Yeah. And so, you know, what's interesting about this is, you know, what is crime and where does it come from? Now, a lot of this comes from like domestic disputes, people fighting with their wives and you know, that sort of thing. But there's also a lot that comes from fighting over resources, whether it's, you know, somebody needs to steal in order to feed themselves because they just can't get a job. Or, you know, whatever has made that difficult. And a lot of this comes, you know, going back full circle to, problems created by government. They create these taxes, which mean, you know, we can't pay our rent, we can't afford food and all these other things, which make resources more scarce, which mean people are going to fight over them. You know, you don't see people breaking into each other's houses when they live in rich neighborhoods. You see poor people who don't have much breaking into other houses, whether they'll break into poor houses or rich houses. But it's fighting over resources is really what it is. And, you know, if the government wasn't taking away from people, there'd be a lot less of that. So we have to understand that government is actually incentivizing a lot of crimes to happen. When we talk about these actual crimes, it has nothing to do with the guns. People think the more guns there are, the more crimes there are going to be. But the truth is, if you take away all the guns, people are going to do their same crimes with knives. And, you know, it's really, you know, statistically, none of that matters. What really matters is that, you know, people are able to defend themselves because, you know, you have a lot of people for so many different reasons saying you could never use it. You should never need a gun. But what happens if you get attacked by somebody? You should be able to defend yourself by whatever means necessary. And, you know, some people will say, well, why don't you just fight like a man and use your fists? Well, what if you're in a wheelchair? What if you're disabled? What if you're very small and your attacker is 3 or 4 times your size? There's so many different scenarios where that just doesn't play out. And so while we like to fantasize in our head, you know, we could just get rid of all the guns and it would solve so many problems. That's simply not realistic. What happens often is you get rid of the guns and you get more violence because people are, you know, afraid. What's actually interesting about what's going on right now is our crime rates are down. Of course, because everybody's locked in over this coronavirus thing. And if you think about it, it's literally because people are afraid of each other. They're not afraid they're going to get shot if they rob somebody. They're afraid they're going to get some illness that's going to kill them. And really, that is the same. That fear is keeping people, it's keeping people from committing crimes. And, you know, well, should people be afraid? And that's the only reason they shouldn't commit crimes? Well, isn't that what the government is? Doesn't the government come in and say, if you steal, we're going to give you 10 years in jail. If you kill someone, we're going to give you the death penalty. Isn't that really just putting fear in someone's mind to prevent them from committing a crime? So if you were to arm all of the people and everybody was able to defend themselves, wouldn't that same fear be just as rational and apply just as much? And we've seen in so many cases, there was a small town, I think in Georgia, where and not that I like the use of making this mandatory, but they mandated that that every person in the county get a concealed carry license. And after they did that, the crime rate plummeted. And one of the reasons that they did this was I think they were having a high rate of rape incidences. And yeah, and that just dropped off. So now it's not even about, you know, somebody's going to attack you with a gun and you need another gun to defend it. It's about, no, somebody's committing a violent crime against somebody. They're usually bigger than the person. The person is not able to defend themselves. But if they don't even have a gun, if they just have the threat of, you know, hey, you know, somebody wants to go rape that woman. Well, there's a possibility I might get shot. Maybe I don't want to do that. Yeah. So there's so many different ways. That it's good to have that right.
So gang, episode 4 of Bitcoin for Idiots, Stephan Livera. He's schooling me on the game. Jump on in and check out all of Stephan's, the next steps in the Bitcoin caper. I say caper because the tips he's given me so far on my first $10 investment have gone up by $2.28. So percentage-wise, that's pretty cool. All right, guys, welcome. Bitcoin for Idiots, Volume 4. How you going, Stephan? Nice to have you again, mate.
Hi, Dean. I'm doing well. Hope you are as well.
Mate, yeah, life's all right. We can't complain in this coronavirus time, but it's nice to have you on, and we're having a bit of fun with this series, or I'm having fun anyway. I'm learning a lot, and I guess I spoke to a lady this morning who's coming on next week as well. She's an author and wrote a book called the Chinese Pandemic, or the China Pandemic, anyway. And she's going, oh, so how does it all work? And I sort of explained, I said, mate, I'm learning a shit ton from doing this, so it's a good experience. Mate, Bitcoin for Dummies, that $10 of yours has grown to $11.21 for those watching. Hey, look at that, we can retire on that. But I mean, as a percentage, that's pretty impressive, really. Like, you know what I mean? It's not $10 to $1 million. I had an auntie who rang me about it this week, and she said, I got an email from a Bitcoin company, and I went, okay, right. She said they promised me $13,000 if I gave them $100. I said, I hope you didn't give them $100. That sounds dodgy as shit.
Yeah, that's right. There are a lot of scams in the space, so you have to listen to trustworthy people and go to trustworthy, products and exchanges, and then eventually, once you get that out and pull it and hold it yourself, then you're not having to trust that exchange. So that's the way to go about it.
You get used to the idea. So I signed up for HODL this week and had a bit of a navigate around there. It looks like an interesting site.
Yeah,
so that'll be fun. So, mate, look, we've been thinking about it. We've been talking about it. So now, monetary. I was speaking to somebody today about money in general. That really, an Australian $100 note is of no more value in reality or in tangible value than a monopoly $100 note. Really. In my head, it's not backed by anything. It's not promised by anything other than the government saying we approve this particular piece of paper being worth $100, which means what? Nothing, something. How does Bitcoin fit in around that concept? Do you, in your area, obviously you know a lot about the monetary system. How does that all come together? What are your thoughts on that as a concept?
Yeah, that's a great way to frame it. So one way to think of that is all value is subjectively perceived. It's like beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? It's like whatever, that's really all there is in terms of value. There is no such thing as backing, right? And the funny thing is a lot of people don't really get this because they think that, say, the US dollar is backed by gold, and it's not. That hasn't been true for a long time.
Once upon a time it was, though. That's how they built this system up. There was a percentage of gold or precious metals that had to be held relative to how much money they printed. Is that correct?
Correct. And so that used to act as a check on government spending. Then in 1971, the US government did what's called closing the gold window. Now, that was meant to be a temporary move, but it has been a permanent move, basically. So now, for about 50 years, the world has been operating on a totally fiat money standard, if you will, that there is nothing back. It's not like you can take that US dollar to the window and try and claim gold back for that. That's just not how it works. Nowadays, it is just freely floating.
So the key word there you just used, sorry, I'll interject. Fiat. Now, for those who are watching this who don't know what that term means, what's the simple way to explain fiat money? I mean, I would explain it by saying it's really no more valuable than monopoly money.
That's right.
The more technical side, or the more correct side, would be?
So it means by decree. Basically, it means it's like the government is just saying, I decree this is the money of the land. Now, this would contrast. So you might think of that like what's called a charterist theory of money. Like if I'm the king or I'm the government, I'm saying this is the law of the land, this is the money of the land, fiat money, use this money. That's one theory. The other theory is more like an emergent bottom-up theory of money. Is that we don't actually need to explicitly agree on what the money was. It's just that there are all manner of different goods out there in the world, and they, in some sense, compete to become money. And the ones that are more saleable and more easily marketable have that tendency to, in the longer term, win out in the market for money. And so that is why historically gold and silver and so on were money, because it helps you fundamentally solve what's known as the double coincidence of want problem. So if we were to trade, you would want exactly what I have, and then I would need to want exactly what you have. But what if we could use this intermediate good, money, to be that indirect medium of exchange? And it just so happens that all different goods have different characteristics about them that make them better or worse at being a good money, right? So if you think
I have a dozen eggs, and you have a bunch of carrots. I'd like to trade your carrots for my eggs. Done deal. And what we've done in replacement of that is the supermarket has a dozen eggs. So if you want them, instead of you going and giving them your dozen carrots, you give them $5, $6, $4, whatever it is at any given time. And that's where that change has happened, I suppose.
Right. And it's because we needed something in between. So a quick example might be, imagine I make something that's really difficult to cut into pieces, right? So maybe I make bicycles and you make eggs. And I want some eggs, but I don't necessarily, like, if I cut the bicycle in half, that's not very valuable, right? Like, it's not divisible. Get me?
Yeah.
And,
yep.
And it makes sense that the money should be having a high weight to value ratio. And that's why gold is quite heavy, right? Because, like, imagine if we were using grass as money or hay as money, then to bring enough that was worthwhile for you to trade, I'd have to carry around like a whole cart of grass or hay to give you to use as money. So it kind of made sense that, oh, actually, yeah, it is easier to use as a money if it's heavier per, value and has these other characteristics, right? Now, gold has all these characteristics that historically made it good for money, right? So it was more easy to identify. It was difficult to destroy. It's hard to counterfeit. It can be counterfeited though, but it's kind of difficult to do that. And it is easily divisible, like we were saying, and it's scarce. That's another very important part, is that it's not so easy to make gold or mine gold. And so that acted as a way of sort of the market selected the best money over time. Now, we believe that Bitcoin has sort of like the characteristics of gold in some ways, but actually is an improvement. It's like a step function improvement, because now you can send it anywhere around the world. Whereas historically, if you wanted to send gold around the world, you either had to wait a long time and hire security guards and do all this stuff, or you had to trust a custodian, right? Like if we use some gold vault and I say, oh yeah, let me transfer, 2 ounces of gold in my account over to Dean, and now Dean has those 2 ounces of gold, but in reality, you're still having to trust that gold vault. In the Bitcoin world, when you hold the private keys, you don't have to trust. You can spend and you can control those Bitcoins yourself without relinquishing that control to a custodian or to a bank or to a vault. And so that's really the power of Bitcoin. And the other key part is Bitcoin has been designed to be specifically limited in supply. There will never be more than 21 million Bitcoins. And so it means you can think more clearly about what percentage of the total supply of Bitcoin you hold. When you hold, like, for example, if I hold 1 Bitcoin, that's 1/21 millionth of the total
of the currency.
Yeah. And whereas with gold,
that's pretty exciting, really.
It can be mined over time, right? And with the US dollar or with the Australian dollar, it's constantly being inflated. And so basically your wealth is being stolen from you in a very hidden way. Whereas those people who store value in Bitcoin over the longer term can more easily store their value. So that's one of the key points there as well. Does that all sort of make sense to you at that point so far?
For me, it sure does. I mean, when I look at, and I talk to people about these things, I look at $100 bill. There's nothing at the moment stopping the mint from printing more. Now, Pauline Hanson, funnily enough, early on in her political career, when asked about things like that, one of the gaffes that a lot of people sort of took the mickey out of her on was that she just said, well, if we need more money, I'll just print some if I'm in charge. That wasn't quite verbatim, but, the general gist was we'll just print more. And funnily enough, all the current financial issues, that's sort of what they're doing. There's nothing behind it other than a government saying, or a Federal Reserve, which is even scarier, saying, yeah, no worries, we'll put more of these $100 bills out on the street, which tangibly it's just glorified paper. There's no limit to it, which decreases its value. Over time, it has to decrease in value. It just has to, because there's so many of them. So
Exactly right.
having that limited amount there means that it will eventually become more and more valuable as more and more people want them, to my understanding. And I'm not an economist by anybody's.
For sure, yeah, and I think you've got it right, because ultimately you have to think about what are the likely outcomes of all of this. The likely outcomes of a lot of this stuff that's going on now, governments and the world is in a lot of debt. They are not going to repay that the honest way. They're either just going to not repay it, or they're just going to repay you in a dishonest way by repaying you back in money that is worth a lot less than what it was when they took out that debt.
Yeah,
so if you're
yeah.
smart and you're thinking about what are the possible or probable ways that the government is going to respond, they're probably going to print. It's becoming very popular now, like this whole UBI, Universal Basic Income, MMT, Modern Monetary Theory. There's a lot of money printing going on, and the central banks around the world are trying to do everything they can to try and keep the house of cards going. They keep buying stocks, or they keep buying these bonds, they keep buying these toxic assets, and basically bailing companies out and bailing out, the whole, trying to bail out the whole world at this point. So they are driving a lot of this huge bubble that we're seeing. And so fundamentally, really, the only alternative way out is with an alternative parallel financial system, and that is Bitcoin, that you can opt in and exit the fiat system in that way.
Which is pretty exciting. I mean, in my very simple way of looking at it all, eventually they're going to have to run out of money, or they're going to have to steal far more from us to make any of this viable. It just doesn't seem sustainable.
Absolutely.
And I don't think you need a university degree to be able to see it. People I'm talking to now are saying, "Oh, my grandkids are going to be paying for this current catastrophe," and I can't say to them, "No, I don't think that's correct," because I'm sure that they're going to be paying for this forever. And UBI is a terrifying concept. I mean, if everybody's got $1,000 guaranteed every week, that $1,000 is going to be worth less and less and less and less year on year. It's got to be. There's no value to it because it's not rare. Value comes from something rare or unique or different. But if you know you're going to get that $1,000 every week, well, all the businesses accordingly, the prices are going up. So a cup of coffee, if everybody's got $1,000 guaranteed, a cup of coffee won't be $5 from a cafe. It'll be $9 or $10. And in my head, it'll just dilute down to being worthless anyway. I could be wrong. You're far more versed in this space than I.
I think that is the way it unfortunately plays out. And so those of us who want to protect ourselves will look at ways of saving some money inside Bitcoin. And that's where within the Bitcoin world, we talk about this idea of stacking sats, right? It's dollar cost averaging. You're not trying to time the low and sell at the high or anything like that. You're just every week or every month, just with some leftover money, you're just buying some Bitcoin. And that's why I'm a big fan of some of these services that offer this dollar cost averaging service. So in Australia, there's one, they're launching pretty soon. They're called Bitaroo, BIT-AROO. Now you do have to KYC with them though, so that, as we mentioned earlier, that's a privacy thing. So those who are more privacy conscious, you can't really dollar cost average or auto buy. Another one, as I mentioned in the last episode, was GetAmber. So I think it's getamber.io. They offer that as like a regular sat stacking service. Again, that's a KYC service. But yeah, otherwise look at places like HODL HODL or BISC, BISQ. Those are ways to acquire in a non-KYC way. Or you can, hopefully, it looks like the restrictions are slowly going to lift and there will be some Bitcoin meetups. And so people who are interested, often newcomers are welcome. And we usually try to teach you there. Like I actually am one of the organizers for the Sydney meetup. And there are meetups around Australia and around the world, really. But yeah, so that's another option for people.
When the restrictions are lifted, we'll run an ad and let everyone know when you're having a meetup, and those who are interested and keen can jump in, and those who aren't, well, Sydney's 4.5 hours away from me at the moment, so I won't be scooting up there for an hour meeting, but then we'll see how it all plays out. So, all right, Stephan, mate, that'll do us for episode 4. I look forward to talking to you next week for episode 5, and we'll give them a couple more tidbits about why Bitcoin's the modern way to go.
Thank you very much for having me, Dean.
Always a pleasure, mate.
Hey Hey guys, now I want to introduce to you a fantastic guest, Father Chris Yates to Resolute TV. We love having him. He's a Manchester United football fan and a man who belongs to the Catholic Apostolic Church. So this is predominantly to do with Brazil. You'll hear all about it right now.
Now, that's why it's so important to place these rights, these freedoms, outside of government. And that's how it's possible to do so. Now, in the English common law system, of which Australia is a beneficiary, and New Zealand and Canada, we don't, well, in fact, Australia, of course, does have a written constitution, but it's not, its purpose was never intended to be that of the US. But in fact, we do still have this appeal to inalienable rights. It's just more obscure. And the way that legally through the Australian Constitution philosophically operates is it operates through the Crown.
Yeah.
Now, for us, and again, this does not depend on your opinion of monarchy or the personhood of Elizabeth Windsor, or none of that matters.
She's a reptile person, isn't she? Depending on which conspiracy theorist you listen to.
She's a beautiful and wonderful person, but
I haven't met her, so I can't vouch for her. But she seems all right to me.
But it doesn't matter on the particularity of that king or queen. It doesn't matter who it is, where they're based. It really doesn't matter. What matters is this notion of the Crown that lifts our rights beyond the legislature. Because ultimately the legislature is subordinate to the Crown. Now, actually, Australia and Britain as well has a very good system, which there's no question who it is that we elect and who it is that forms law. No one ever thinks that the royal family are going to come and rule as dictators in any of their sovereign territories. But the Crown does represent that protection and our freedoms. Now, this is one of the problems with the Republican argument in Australia, is that I understand, and I am an Australian, just for those that don't know, I've been an Australian for 4 years this year. So I am a citizen, twice law to Her Majesty. But one of the problems
when you got to the airport, did they ask you if you had a criminal record?
Yeah, I did ask.
You weren't sure. You weren't sure whether you still needed one.
That's right. I didn't think it was mandatory. But
yeah, no.
But the key problem with the Republican argument, and the reason why many Australians might think it is kind of odd and bizarre that we still have this monarchy based in London that's the Queen of Australia, and you can have a debate about that. But the major problem is that Republicans aren't putting forward a model that actually enshrines all of the things that the Crown enshrines. Because if all of a sudden you put that in the name of a titular president, for example, it's very difficult to remove that from politics.
Hey gang, thanks for tuning in to Resolute TV episode 4. Don't forget, we've also got most of these episodes and interviews on the podcast on Spotify. Check out the Freedom Chef's Liberty Kitchen on Spotify. Some of this stuff, there's some exclusive stuff, there's some new stuff, but it's all pretty cool. Also, feel free to subscribe to Resolute TV. Hit the button or whatever all the cute girls do on their YouTube channels. It's not my thing, I'm not pretty enough. But guys, tune in. Next week we've got an epic guest. The guy is absolutely world class. He's an American. I'm not going to tell you too much yet. You're going to have to watch out for the ads. But this guy is absolutely spectacular and you'd be mad to miss it. Tune in. That's not bad.